The Big 12 Conference may have done away with their annual preseason media poll, but the Locked On Podcast Network decided to put together our own, and I think BYU is in a great spot in said rankings.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 13-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insiders, your host here on this podcast, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, today's show, by the way, brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Download the GameTime app today, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on today's show, we are talking BYU football and where they are placed in our first ever Locked On Big 12 preseason power poll from our hosts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Then we'll talk about the incredible spending spree that Texas Tech has been on that seems to have been one-upped with the commitment of Felix Ojo. Does that mean the BYU is falling behind the Red Raiders? We'll talk about that. And then we'll also talk about BYU basketball, both men's and women's, with both AJ DeBonsa as well as Delaney Gibbs showing out on the international stage this past week. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. I'm going to waste no more time and throw this right up here for you guys. So many of you know the Big 12 Conference announced they were doing away with their annual preseason media poll. I think in some ways they may have been shamed from the fact that they had a team go from worst to first last year, speaking of Arizona State, going from 16th in that preseason poll last year to number one this year. Some of you may argue they're actually just doing what all of us want them to do, speaking of just not putting out a preseason poll. But the bigger point is that we at the Locked On Podcast Network and across our Locked On Big 12 part of the network decided we'll fill the void. So we have 15 of the 16 conference teams currently have a host that does a daily podcast covering those teams. The only one that does not are the Cincinnati Bearcats. And then obviously we have Drake Toll, who covers the entire conference for Locked On Big 12. He weighed in. So we had 16 different members of the network vote on these. And as you might expect, the defending champion Arizona State Sun Devils are back at number one in this preseason poll. At number two, Kansas State. The Wildcats, I think, are a trendy pick as they seem to be annually for the Big 12 Conference. Number three, the big spending Texas Tech Red Raiders coming in at number three. Baylor, with their resurgent season last year with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback, they check in at number four. Iowa State Cyclones at number five with Rocco Becht back at quarterback. And then your BYU Cougars checking in at number six. So still essentially in the top tier, speaking of BYU, maybe kind of that second cut, it feels like, on the conference. The rest of the poll, for those of you listening to this and not seeing it on YouTube, as I've thrown up this graphic, we have TCU at number 7, the Utah Utes at number 8, Kansas at number 9, Colorado, the Buffaloes, and Coach Prime at number 10, Houston Cougars at number 11, Oklahoma State at number 12, West Virginia at number 13, the Cincinnati Bearcats 14, UCF 15th, and coming up in the rear, the Arizona Wildcats. Now, I think this poll laid out essentially how I thought it might lay out when I was putting together mine. I had a few teams flipped and flopped there. For example, I had Utah and TCU flipped from 7 and 8. I actually had BYU at number 5 in my poll. But I think all things considered, BYU is in a very, very strategic spot. Now, having had conversations with a number of the other hosts when they were asking about the situation at BYU and what the quarterback situation in particular was, it was a very hot topic as to how they slotted BYU in their polls. Some guys decided, you know what? I'm not all that concerned that BYU doesn't necessarily have a proven option at quarterback right now, because BYU was more than just their quarterback a season ago, as we have talked about often, especially with the Jake Retzloff situation still pending. But then others said that they thought the BYU, the fact that they succeeded so often in one-score games last year, combined with the uncertainty at quarterback, they opted to drop BYU in their poll. But that's where BYU, that's why they check in at number 6. Does that mean that BYU can't rise to the top here and challenge for conference supremacy? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I think BYU is in a spot where they still are getting, I think, some laurels thrown their way and acknowledgement that BYU, they were more than just Jake Retzloff last year. This was a team, as I have said multiple times, was the sum total of their parts. Speaking of the offense, complemented the defense, which complemented the special teams, and vice versa in every which way. BYU got it done in all three phases last year, and that's why BYU enjoyed an 11-2 campaign and made a run nearly to the Big 12 title game and having a chance to play in that Alamo Bowl when they just absolutely demolished Colorado, and I think put on a show that had a lot of people saying, okay, maybe BYU should have been more heavily considered for the college football playoff as an at-large team than they were. But now BYU, the biggest thing they can do to either prove people right or prove the haters wrong is go out there, find an adequate option at quarterback, because Jake Retzlaff, for all intents and purposes, is no longer with this program. I know that On3 and others have reported that he still hasn't entered the transfer portal, but that portal window, the special portal window we talked about late last week, that opens today. So by the time some of you watch and or listen to this, Jake Retzlaff's name may have already appeared in that portal, but for all intents and purposes and the purposes of this conversation, Jake Retzlaff is not an option at quarterback for BYU. So you're going to have to find an option, whether it's McKay Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, or Bear Bachmeyer. They have to step up and fill in adequately, if not exceed what Jake Retzlaff meant to BYU. And if they do just that, BYU's got enough talent returning across the board for this team. Yes, there's been some spots that have obviously taken hits. You have an All-American kick returner in Keelan Marion who left the program. You have some wide receivers, offensive linemen that left. But I think the overall depth and breadth of talent that BYU has put together on this roster should help them, I think, stay at least in the conversation for the Big 12 race all season long. Every expectation from every prognosticator or odds maker out there, every sports book, including our friends at FanDuel, seem to think that this conference is going to be a jumbled mess all season long. The absolute highest over-under win total that I have seen for a Big 12 team with my own eyes, so we may have seen a little bit higher. I have seen 9.5 as the top end. The low I have seen, 4.5 wins. Everybody's slotted between potentially as many as 10 wins and as low as 4 wins. That means there's going to be a lot of upsets, a lot of crazy games, and a lot of outcomes that are going to affect the Big 12 race all season long. And all BYU has to do, if they want to stay in the mix for the Big 12 race, is stay above the fray and continue to find ways to win more often than not. If BYU can grind out 8-4 or 9-3 this year, yeah, they absolutely could find themselves once again down the stretch in the hunt for the Big 12 title game as they were last year. Now, combination of how tiebreakers play out and the like, that may either help or cost BYU. But I think that the way that Kalani Sitake has gone about building this roster for the BYU football program leads me to believe that even with the uncertainty at quarterback and looking at this poll here with BYU checking in at number 6, I've got a lot, I should say, of faith that the BYU Cougars, they're going to surprise some folks that think that BYU is going to fall off simply because they lost their quarterback. Could I be wrong about that? Absolutely, I could be. But I have got a lot of thoughts that BYU, they love the spot of being overlooked, underappreciated, I guess, in a way, for the overall talent base that's in the BYU football program. And if people want to overlook them, they'll just say, hey, great. Keep doing that. And we'll go out there and do like we did last year and prove you wrong week in and week out. All right. Are the BYU Cougars in danger of falling behind in the it's the ever-growing arms race that is college football? Well, Texas Tech seems to have taken it to a whole nother level. Obviously, a conference made of BYU's, what could be a pretty good rival in a way. Can BYU stay with a program that's willing to fork over potentially as much as $5.1 million over 3 years for an offensive tackle? Let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Now, all of us have decided at some point, it feels like at a last minute, like, hey, I want to go do this or that or whatever it was. If you want to go to a ball game with friends or family, maybe it's game day, suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where our friends at GameTime come into the mix. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. And with the money you'll save on said tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. GameTime makes it all possible. They take buying tickets and they make them fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. So you've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying and maybe finding a better deal when you finally purchase those tickets. The best part is GameTime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for exciting upcoming Major League Baseball games. For example, I'm a big Seattle Mariners fan, as many of you know. I need maybe to get out to Seattle this year and watch Big Dumper. He's having an absolutely historic season. It's been at Cal Raleigh. You may want to take advantage of that. So the best part is seat views can be seen right in the app, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the stadium. game. And the best part is with that game time price guarantee, you'll always get the best deal option for you guys. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and it's all guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, subscribe, rate, and review the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the show. Make sure you hit that bell notification icon so when a new show drops, you'll be the first to be a part to catch up on anything you may have missed. But also, make sure you share with your family and friends. What you guys have done to help us have an incredible first half of 2025 is much appreciated. It's been absolutely electric. We finished above, I think, all but 2 shows across the Locked On College Network, which is like 60 plus shows now. We were number 3 across the entire. It's the highest we've ever been. Let's put it this way. In the 7+ years we've done this podcast, absolutely incredible. And thank you for y'all's support. All right, let's talk BYU football. You probably saw the news over the weekend. An incredible stunner on July 4th is 5-star offensive tackle Felix Ojo announced he is committed to, wait for it, the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Now, his agent, Derek Shelby, announced shortly after, I think, that a commitment became official, that his client had signed what he said was a 3-year, wait for it, $5.1 million contract with the Texas Red Raiders. He said is fully guaranteed. Now, some reporting has come out since then with sources at Texas Tech saying the actual deal is a guarantee of $775,000 annually in revenue share payments. So that comes out to $2.3 million. But there is other apparently clauses in the contract that he has signed with Texas Tech that could take it north of $5 million. That's an incredible amount of money. But the question is, are the BYU Cougars willing, A, and B, capable of competing if Texas Tech is going to do this with players out there? Now, the biggest thing is that, as they say here, the reason why the contract could be taken, the escalated total value, this comes from the Athletic, of the contract in the $5 million range is if there is a large jump in the revenue sharing cap for schools, because obviously that could help pay out because he's, I think, guaranteed a certain percentage of said cap, but also if there has been minimal regulation of NIL institution in 2021, that if that continues, it's challenged in court, it's done away with. The NCAA or this new College Sports Commission simply don't have the teeth to enforce the new rules on anybody. That's what Texas Tech seems to be banking on here, either a major jump in the cap or having just the Wild West return in college football. My belief is that BYU is fully intent on competing as best they possibly can in the NIL era. We all saw BYU got a lot of, I guess you'd call it notoriety or pub or publicity, whatever you want to term it, when NIL became a thing. And BYU, particularly with basketball, was splashing the cash on guys like AJ DeBonsa. But that's obviously translated over into BYU football with some of the high-level prospects that have also joined BYU in recent months. To my knowledge, BYU has not signed a deal that lucrative with anybody in the BYU football program. But if BYU is willing to compete, they're going to have to be willing to go to that level. Speaking of a guy like Felix Ojo, and maybe guaranteeing him as much as 3 years and in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to get talent into this program. I think BYU, that what was the guy's name? Was trying to think. It was I remember what the last name was, but he talked with ESPN and used the quote, "We won't be outbid." Well, if BYU is not going to be outbid, this might be kind of the new era for 5-star talents. Did BYU pay this much for a guy like Ryder Lyons when he committed to BYU? Only he knows, because BYU is not ever, and I'll be very blunt about this, going to release the terms of their NIL contracts. If players or their agents are willing to do so, that may glean some insight, but they're very reticent to do so. In the case of this with Felix Ojo, his agent would not release the actual contract to the Athletic to get an actual look at what the numbers say in the contract he had. They were going off what sources said at Texas Tech. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU is stepping into a whole new era in college football. They've been very competitive to this point, but how much more is it going to take to remain competitive in this space? Because that's an incredible incredible amount of money for an offensive tackle. And I've said it before, and I'll reiterate it here. The BYU, their overall strategy when it comes to NIL and their revenue share, which I'm expecting somewhere around 80% probably goes to the BYU football program. So if you want to take that $20.5 million cap number, let's just shorten it to $20 million for conversation purpose. 80% of that is $16 million. So let's just say that's how much money that Dave George, as the GM of BYU football, and Kalani Sitake as the head coach, have to allot to their players. The way the BYU is approaching this is they're going about it the way the NFL does. And what the NFL does is they value different positions at different levels. Obviously, offensive tackles are worth a certain amount. They're not worth as much as quarterbacks. They're maybe not as worth as much as edge players, but they're not far off. If Felix Ojo is worth north of $775,000 annually, that seems like it's out of the range of what I think most programs are willing to spend on an offensive tackle. But I can guarantee you that there are agents out there for these players who are saying, okay, that number holds true. What's my guy worth going forward? That's the situation at hand here. Is BYU has to be very strategic in how they allot this money to different players, because everybody's going to have their hand out at every single turn saying, hey, I want more money. Are players going to be willing to hold out at some point? That's a big question I have about this as well. Let's say, for example, that Felix Ojo, at some point over the next 3 years, he's playing for Texas Tech. He's a member of the 2026 recruiting class, so he would not enroll until next January at the earliest. So we're talking 2026, 2027, 2028. Over the next 3 years, if he is not paid out his full allotment, whether that's $775,000 or north of $1 million, depending on which of the contracts and the reports that you believe, is he going to be willing to sit out and say, hey, until I'm paid up, I'm not playing? That's a huge question mark. And it's got to be something that BYU, and as well as the rest of college football, I've got to be considering when it comes to dealing with this. It's a crazy era. And as many of us often say, many probably have heard, well, money talks. And this is a crazy, crazy world that it seems like the costs of playing at this level seem to only be going up, no matter what they say when it came to that house settlement coming into effect, and it's going to put guardrails on the house settlement. What Felix Ojo just signed here with what Texas Tech did is essentially kind of snub their nose in the face of the house settlement and said, hey, try and enforce those rules on us. We'll see how that ends up in court. If Texas Tech is willing to splash this much money, I'll guarantee you that the Texases, the Ohio States that lost out in this race, well, now they know what the going rate may be to compete at this level. How much further are people willing to go? How much further are they going to be willing to spend? How much more are they going to be willing to spend to stay competitive in this world? And if BYU wants to continue to be that force that they are in college football and be a program that is noted for its willingness to spend money on talent, man, the stakes seem to only be getting more and more expensive. And at some point, it does feel like there's a breaking point, but at the same time, I just look at what professional sports are, and it seems like all they're doing is printing money every other year. It feels like when a new media rights deal or a new sale of a team. We just had the who am I thinking of? The Los Angeles Lakers, $10 billion. Absolute insane number to pay for a professional sports franchise. But once again, it just feels like the cost of doing business in sports is only getting more expensive. And hey, I will add this. If BYU's boosters want to continue to flash the cash and be a force in the NIL space, well, that means that BYU will remain in the race and will still continue to kind of, as I said, for some people, it's notoriety. For BYU, it's good pub. I've said it once, I'll say it again. BYU looks like, for example, the AJ DeBonsa deal, whether you believe he's making $5, $6, or $7 million, those are the different reports out there about how much NIL money he was getting from BYU. Well, I can tell you, BYU expects to get at least tenfold back in publicity from AJ DeBonsa. And part of that was, as we'll talk about here momentarily, is him shining on the international stage for the USA junior national team with the U19s that won a gold medal this past weekend. It's a kind of a give and take, and you have to determine how willing you are to play in the sandbox that BYU has been competing in and how much longer they're willing to stay in said sandbox. But if what their boosters have been saying is to be believed, that means BYU's in it to win it. And I guess this is the new price of doing business, because apparently $5 million for an offensive tackle is the new going rate, which is crazy. But at the same time, you can guarantee that other agents, They're going to be flashing that number in the face of other programs, BYU included, when it comes to their clients in future negotiations. All right, coming up next, we're talking BYU basketball. 2 BYU basketball stars, both the men's and the women's team. AJ DeBonce on the men's side, Delaney Gibb on the other side, shining on the international stage as they have collected hardware at the AmeriCup as well as the U19 World Cup of Basketball. We'll talk about what the impact was for both of them and how it will impact BYU basketball, both men's and women's basketball going forward. We'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. I am headed to Big 12 Media Days today. In fact, I'll be flying out this afternoon to Dallas. I'll be over in Frisco at the Star, the practice facility for the Dallas Cowboys, over the next 2 days, bringing insight and intel on BYU and the Big 12 Conference that you won't find literally anywhere else. And the best part is with the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, comes to your phone in the form of a text message. I can get those out to you as soon as I hear anything. If you want that inside scoop, join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Best part about it is if you're a new member, 14 days of a free trial for signing up today. So you get 2 full weeks and you get all the intel over the next 2 days plus for free before you charge a single penny. It's just $5 a month afterwards to be a part of the Insiders Group. So join us today. Link is in the show notes below and be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, let's talk BYU basketball before we go on today's show. Now, some of you probably watch this is on YouTube mainly, but AJ DeBonce absolutely shined for Team USA and their junior national team as he led BYU. Hopefully he's leading BYU to some gold in the future, but he led Team USA to a 109-76 victory over Germany in the gold medal game of the FIBA U19 World Cup over in Switzerland. Now, he's also named MVP for his efforts in leading BYU to that gold medal. He had 11 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and is still in that final. It's his 3rd gold medal in his trophy case after leading the U18s to the FIBA U18 AmeriCup and the 2023 FIBA U17 World Cup title as well. He is trending towards being an international icon for Team USA because the expectation is that AJ, after his one and done season at BYU, as we expect, he will be a part of BYU history, but more importantly, of our Team USA history going forward, because the expectation is that he will be part of the Team USA, kind of the new era, as guys like LeBron James and others age out of Team USA and the World Cup, as well as Olympic competitions. Well, in comes guys like AJ DeBonce. He is the 5th American to be named MVP of the FIBA U19 World Cup. He joins Chet Holmgren, Reggie Perry, Jalen Brunson, and Aaron Gordon, who are named MVP for that award. He also earned All-Star 5 accolades for a 2nd straight World Cup after averaging 14.3 points, 4.1 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and just over 1 steal in 20 minutes per game. Shot 68.4% from inside the arc and 84% from the free throw line. Really, the only thing that did not come for AJ in this tournament was his 3-point shooting, but that 84% mark from the free throw line, because let's just put it this way. You know the term about like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the NBA playoffs was the free throw merchant? Well, AJ DeBonce, dude, he was absolutely living at the free throw line, and that's going to serve him well in college basketball. As foul happy as college basketball officials seem to be, he is going to draw fouls in droves, and if he can make his free throws at an 84% clip, he is going to pile up points at the free throw line. Is it going to anger a lot of opposing fan bases? Absolutely it's going to. But the nice part is BYU's got that on their side, and what AJ is doing, which, by the way, some of you may be wondering, what's the level of competition he's competing at? Well, let's just put it this way. All of these guys, the top tier players in this U19 World Cup, are going to be either EuroLeague players next year or college players alongside AJ DeBonce. He's playing amongst his peers and the top cut of talent across the entire globe, and all he did was shine above everybody else and was named tournament MVP. He is an absolute star in the making. We are lucky to watch what's going to unfold on the court at the Marriott Center for AJ DeBonce over the next 6, 7, 8 months and change, but he's already doing what he's doing on the international stage, and now he's bringing it to BYU, and I'm sure that he's going to be unhappy with his overall 3-point shooting in this tournament, and he'll be working on that religiously, but there's a pretty strong correlation between free throw percentage and 3-point percentage. So if shooting 84% from the free throw line, well, that means that he maybe been a little bit off with his 3-point shooting, and so long as he dials that in, I think with his ability to draw the overall I'm trying to say this, like he's kind of the gravity that makes everything go for opposing teams. Because remember, in this tournament, he was the focal point of opposing defenses, and all he did was continue to shine on the biggest stage that he could find at this point in his international career. And then, oh, by the way, other players, he would dish off to them, and they made plays around him. BYU's put together a roster that's got a lot of nice three-point shooting around him. So maybe he doesn't have to necessarily become a prolific 40+% three-point shooter. If he does, he may become just near unstoppable in college basketball. But it's incredible to watch what AJ's doing, and it only engenders more confidence that he is going to be a guy that BYU fans are going to be absolutely loving to watch over the next, as I said, 6, 7, 8 months as he finishes out career. But I also should mention here, and I want to make sure I get this in, that Delaney Gibb, she on the women's side of things, well, she is absolutely shining as well. In her senior team national debut, now this is like the actual Team Canada, so Canadian senior team, she actually dished out the game-winning assist in Canada's 76-75 double overtime win over Argentina to secure the bronze medal at the FIBA Women's America Cup down in Santiago, Chile. She is not playing. AJ's, like I said, playing with a bunch of guys that are going to be playing college basketball alongside him, 18, 19 years old, playing in that World Cup. This is against the world's best, I guess, at least in North and South America in the America Cup for Delaney Gibb. She's a sophomore in college basketball, and this is her senior team debut, and all she did was average, let's see, what was it, 9.1 points, 2.9 rebounds, and 1.3 assists, as she led Canada to a 6-1 record and that bronze medal. Delaney Gibb, much like AJ DeBonsa, may be worth the price of admission for BYU women's basketball this season, and I'll just add this little tidbit. If you want to sit in much better seats than you probably will ever get for BYU men's basketball this year, buy some women's season tickets and go watch Delaney Gibb up close and enjoy what she's going to be doing for Lee Kamard and the rest of the BYU women's basketball team. They've got an incredible squad, I think they've compiled, led by Gibb this year for BYU women's basketball. And I don't want to just praise AJ DeBonsa and leave Delaney Gibb and the women's team out in the cold, because it's absolutely electric what both of these players I think are going to be capable of doing for BYU basketball. There's going to be some really, really fun opportunities to watch high-level hoops in Provo, Utah this year. And the nice part is we've got international stars on both the men's and women's side of things. And if you're a basketball fan who wants to watch some of the best young talent across the entire sport, you have to travel very far. All you got to do is go down to the Marriott Center and watch Delaney Gibb and or AJ DeBonsa do their thing. And I'm not going to even discount what their teammates are doing, because I know that Kevin Young on his side of things will be very quick, I'm sure, to jump in and say, hey, don't ignore what Richie Saunders is capable of, or what Robert Wright III or Keba Keita, whoever you want to start on the men's side of things. I'm sure Lee Kamar, John Wardenberg, and the rest of the women's team are very quick to point out, hey, we've got other talents in this women's basketball squad that are eager to kind of show what they're capable of, as they hope to have a resurgent year on the women's side of things after two pretty lackluster years in the Big 12 the last 2 years. I love what the basketball programs at BYU are building here. It's going to be really, it's going to be a fun winter. And like I said, the men's team, it sounds like season tickets are going to sell out before too long, but I can tell you from good experience, if you want to sit in some pretty darn good seats that you would never get an opportunity to sit in for a men's game, but you still want to watch some high-level hoops, go enjoy women's basketball. And obviously, enjoy what Delaney Gibb is doing on her side of things. It's a great opportunity to support both basketball programs. I know there are a number of you out there who probably have season tickets to both and enjoy them equally, but it's a great thing to watch what BYU has building right now under both Lee Kamard on the women's side of things, as well as Kevin Young on the men's side of things. And now they've got international stars who've got hardware to their names that they're bringing back to Provo, Utah, to get ready for a big college basketball season ahead over the next, I said, 8 months or so in Provo, Utah. So that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. My next edition will be coming to you live from Frisco, Texas. Looking forward to being at Big 12 Media Days. I'll kind of have a primer for you guys early tomorrow, and then obviously we'll have updates throughout the day there at the Star in Frisco, Texas. But hey, the reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing, going to work for Locked On, doing this, is because of your support. So truthfully, you guys are the reason why I'm going to Texas and why I'm going to work my absolute rear end off over the next 2 days to give you guys the best coverage I possibly can muster. So as always, thank you for your continued support of Locked On Cougars. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day. And until tomorrow, everybody, live from Frisco, Texas and Big 12 Media Days, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.